This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Hello everyone. I hope we've got nearly everybody here, but I'm sure they'll kind of creep in drips and drabs. But I thought in the interest of getting all of the exciting content that you're about to sit through on the road, we might get started. Pleased to meet you. My name is Mairead Staley. I'm the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music Marketing and Recruitment Officer, and I'm delighted to be here this evening to welcome you to My Melbourne Future in Music. We've got a really jam-packed next hour or so, so forgive me if I'm a little bit tyrannical when it comes to timing, but I just want to make sure everybody gets heard and everybody gets in bed on time on a school night. So what are we doing to start with? I'm going to invite Associate Professor Don Immel to the stage, and he's going to give you a kind of broad sweeping overview of the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music and the Bachelor of Music program. We're then going to have a student panel and more specific discipline-specific area presentations here in Fed Hall. At about 8 o'clock, fingers crossed, I'm going to invite you to separate into 3 groups. So those of you who came interested in music performance, composition, musicology or ethnomusicology, I'm going to ask that you stay in Fed Hall. We're going to have another panel discussion with our distinguished academics and musicians. Jazz and improvisation and interactive composition will follow me. Through the back doors, I've got my high-vis hair on, should be easy to spot. We'll be moving out into breakout rooms to have some informal discussions and hopefully enlighten you and inspire you to come study at the Conservatorium. So, without further ado, well, actually, first I would like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and future of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people of the Eastern Coordination. And if Don Immel could please join me on the stage, and you could join me in welcoming him and yourselves to tonight. Thanks, Don.
So thank you for coming out tonight. It's really delightful to see so many interested and eager students and parents and curious parents, and what is my student interested in getting into, and should I support it or not? We're just thrilled to have so many here for this nice informational session. The brochures and pamphlets downstairs have lots of information, and in fact it has a lot of the information that I could peruse through, but I won't. I will leave as much time as we can for our student panel and for our specific areas to discuss in more depth, and then leave plenty of time also for questions. So my name again is Don Immel, and I'm one of the associate directors of the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music within the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music. And I'm representing our boss, Gary McPherson, this evening, who has just arrived back from Munich, I believe, and has decided that he needs to sleep before he falls over. So that's why I'm here this evening with you. But this is my first run through these particular facts, but the original University Conservatorium of Music, established in 1894, the oldest and the most comprehensive school of music in Australia, and also the largest. Currently we are based, as you know, both Parkville and the Southbank campuses, but it's a very exciting time, not just for this slide in back of me, but it's a very exciting time for the conservatory and for the fine arts faculty. We are moving almost entirely down to Southbank complex, and in fact about 300 meters from here the building is maybe up to about the 4th or 5th level now, and should be completed in January or February. So we will actually, any intake from this coming at the end of this year will be primarily based in our new facilities, and they are terrific. They're really, really great. specifically made. In fact, the Dean, Barry Cunningham, was talking about how this building was needed in 1974 when there were some, I don't know, 100 students in the conservatorium. There are now well over 800 students in just the conservatorium, and we are still in the same facilities as we were in 1974. So this is a big move here as well. In addition, it's a great time to be a student and a member of staff at the conservatorium. All the great experiences and knowledge base of our staff, combined with many, maybe a dozen or so in the last couple of years, new full-time teaching and research and performing staff like myself and others that you'll hear from later tonight. This is due to the infrastructure of both the university and the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music understanding what we need to help students be not only competitive, but creative and thinking intellectual people to make Australia even better than it is already. So you can hear that my accent is not particularly Bogan, but it is, I was drawn to this university and to this faculty because of the potential, and we're seeing that potential now. It's really, really thrilling. So I'm hoping you'll get a chance to talk with some of the students that are here tonight and ask specific questions about this. Okay, so a snapshot of the actual Bachelor of Music degree. As it mentions here, it's a 3-year full-time study, and again, most of your work will be down here at Southbank with some breadth, meaning some other areas of interest to you, the student, that can take a number of classes outside of music, your music foundation. This is actually the Melbourne model at its core, and there are a bunch of interesting things about the Melbourne model. I've been here 6 years now, and I'm finally starting to understand what the Melbourne model is and what the potential and the possibilities are for students within the Melbourne model. So briefly, in your initial 3-year study, you will be focusing on one of these specializations as you desire. And then in addition to that, you can take all the subjects that your parents want you to take. Biology, medicine, law, corporate law, languages, mathematics. Wine tasting, true. Beer tasting, true. Many other opportunities for going in your own ways. But the idea of this is after your initial 3-year degree, you should be able to go in any direction you want from there. That means after your initial degree in music, you could go straight into a master's with a specific test exam like everybody else has to. You can go straight into a master's or even the doctorate towards becoming a general practitioner or a lawyer or a doctor or a scientist, whatnot, with that 4th year pointing you in that direction. So I don't know about you, but I've said this many times to many students. I would rather have a expertly trained violinist who is turned into a surgeon do brain surgery on me with that great knowledge of how you just move these little bits here and there than I would, some guy that has been in a book looking at biology their whole lives. And that idea, that concept is at the center of what the Melbourne model is based on. Do things that you're interested in doing. Learn the basic skills in one area and make a difference in many areas. So the initial 3-year degree, which is quite intensive for music history, music theory, for the PCME areas, and the basics in our other areas, leads towards, often, and in most cases, towards a 4th-year honors in music, in most cases. And it also can lead to, we'll see some pathways in a few minutes, to the research higher degrees and or more professional level degrees. So our alumni, if you can go back to alumni, that would be great.
Certainly.
Could you go back one more just to make sure that I didn't miss an important thing here? Nope, that's good. Thank you. So our alumni, you can find our alumni in concert halls, as you probably know Ben Northey, or maybe you're aware of Ben Northey, who is the associate conductor of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and also conducts the one of the fine orchestras over in New Zealand. He is a graduate saxophonist from the conservatorium, and as you can see, this list here is quite generous, and not only in music and the arts. There are many forward-thinking CEOs and politicians, and certainly most importantly, secondary, primary school teachers, caregivers, and on and on. So any direction you can think of, you can do it better with a degree from the MCM, in my opinion. So we'll see more names in a moment. Yes, so here's the what you can go on from your Bachelor of Music. You can certainly go on into employment at that stage. For example, again, I'm coming at this from a classical lineage. I'm actually a jazz trombonist as well, but as a classical lineage in my work here now at the Conservatorium. I think I have students that come up a lot, say, I'd really like to work in a studio and do some engineering work and whatnot. And there are courses for that, but what we're interested in doing is making sure that our students are competitive so that they're the ones that the studios will want to hire, because they can hear how a phrase turns. They can hear when the intonation is great. They can hear the rhythmic changes. They also understand the complexities of how to listen to whatever recording is coming through and how to make edits and so on. So directly from that 3-year degree, you can certainly go into any direction you want as far as employment. But beyond that, it's very, very common for our students to go on and get a 4th year. And that's for many reasons. It gets more specialized for you in your area in the 4th year. But it also allows you to be more competitive for getting into the graduate programs. And currently, there are many different pathways you can go for your master's and beyond master's. The performance teaching master's is designed for music educators and people that are interested in both studio teaching in the schools, but also classroom teaching. And with 18 months and another 16 months, you have the full education certification from Victoria. Master of Music Therapy, accrediting through the Australian Music Therapy Association. It's been very successful course recently. And our brand new course, Master of Music Orchestral Performance, which we just had our first intake this year. And it guarantees that each of our students plays with Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and receives training, specialized training from, of course, our staff and our own orchestra and beyond. Additionally, the Master of Music by Research, basically Australia recognizes performance is research with a few add-ons and bells and whistles here and there and a few words written about it. So in line with that, we have Master of Music by Research, which is currently paid for by our government. And these areas, as you can see, are quite extensive. So composition, interactive composition, jazz and improvisation, musicology, ethnomusicology, music performance, music psychology, performance science, music therapy, and then further degrees in doctorate, PhD, and doctorate of philosophy of music. So these are things, I think these are important for you to know about, but you'll probably find them everywhere. So I won't go into too much detail with the VTAC part. But students and parents, here's what you need to know about if you're auditioning as some kind of a performer or a composer. Have your skills, practice daily, do those things, work towards a high level of competency as a composer or as a interactive composer, interesting electronics, whatever you're doing. Get that as high as you can, but make sure, especially this last year or two in your secondary program, make sure you are doing the things that will keep you competitive on your ATARs. Those are two areas, and especially in the English score. That is one area that we do see a lot of students almost make the cut, and the university basically says, hey, their score's too low in English. Sorry, we can't admit them. That's not just for overseas students, that's for our own Australian English-speaking students as well. So be aware of those things. Yes, we'd like you to perform at a high level or do the activity that you do at a high level, but if you have an off day, we can hear through that. If you need an embouchure change, we can see that. If you have some technical stuff that you need to work through, that's why you're coming to us specialized teachers, to work through those things. But you do the best that you can at that time, and then from there on, it's our job to help you become what you want to be. So, the timelines, as you saw there before, all individuals that are getting into the BMOS, I believe, still the case, unless you live overseas, will be auditioning live or coming in for an interview live. And please check closely and carefully for when those dates and deadlines are, because they do come in and we try to get emails out and information out, but sometimes people, you know, for one reason or another miss those deadlines. There's plenty to be said about how the VTAC system works, or is sometimes confusing, but I'm not sure that I have the time or the knowledge to weave you through all of that right now. There are people here that probably can help. Yes, so upcoming events, if you'd like more of this information in more detail and by meeting the individuals that are likely to be working directly with you once you're a student here, this is a really good project or a really good day to come to. All of our areas that we're discussing today will have specific sessions, but beyond that, at the end of the day, the MCM Orchestra will present a free concert in Hamer Hall, massive concert of great literature, and you're all invited to attend that at the end of the open day as well. So look for your open day brochures and advertisements. Great. So I've worked through the initial information rather quickly, but I just want to just present to you again the reason this is a pretty special place and the reason right now it's such an interesting time to be at such a special place. Anybody that is in the fields of music, business, dentistry, whatever, what have you, will know that the success of any company or any program comes down to the people that are invested in it and the people that are staying here long term. And I can say we have a remarkable staff, composition staff, jazz performance staff, classical performance staff, ethnomusicologists. It's remarkable and growing. And this conservatorium has really become quite the candy store. And the only thing that students are limited by is their own energy and the capital of time to spend on any bits of candy that they're interested in. It's really a fantastic place to be, and I think when you talk with the students, I think you'll get that vibe as well. It's a great community, and we're really looking out for one another, and that's the name of the game for a tertiary. I was a secondary school for a while, teacher for a while. Tertiary education, and having a community like this to go off into your eventual workforce is essential for your success. And so we really welcome you. So any initial questions I'm happy to take now, and if they are going to be covered later in more depth, I will just say they're going to be covered later in more depth. But are there any specific early questions that you want to make sure are addressed this evening? Yes? Okay, so we will discuss that in performance. His question was, how do you get into one of the top orchestras at the university? And we'll certainly cover that in the performance-specific session. Yes, and one more?
What is life like as a student at the Melbourne
We will have a panel of students right here, and I hope that question will be asked. And if it's not, I'll allow you to ask it again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Because I don't have any idea. I went to school in Central Washington University, Ellensburg. Yeah, almost. Thanks, Susan. Yes? The ATARs as a whole? Thank you for the question. Yes, I didn't mean to single out English. It's just that generally, if there is an issue, it happens to be with English. But no, the ATAR is collected as a part of the package. There is no magic number. For example, if you play an A+ bagpipe audition and you have a 71 ATAR, that A+ looks pretty shiny, and we'll figure out, vice versa, if you have audition which clearly didn't go well, but there's some skills in there that we can see, and your ATARs are 99.94, then I don't think that's possible. 99.95 I think is possible. Then again, there's a place for you in how it studies. So, and then a mixture of all of those things, of course, and your community doings and other things that come into play as well. Thank you. There's one more here, and then.
So, just for those who play like more rock-associated genres, is there a place for them in this bachelor as well?
Within the PCME, Performance, Composition, Ethnomusicology, that the rock side or the studio drum type thing is not part of that side of the conservatorium. However, is Rob Vinks here? Yeah. So he can speak to this through it's called Jazz and Improvisation.
Yeah, we'll cover that down the track.
Okay, yes. Yes, there is. Yes.
You sold the Melbourne model really well, but I just wanted to clarify, if after a music degree you actually wanted to go and do research or economics,
Yep.
you would, as part of your breadth subject, you would have had to have done a prerequisite.
That's almost correct. It depends on which area you're going towards, but yes, it would certainly speed up the process if you take in your breadth, say you're 20 or 25% of your classes are in breadth. If you took a series of the biology and the pre-med type classes that are required, then you could actually go directly in with the same test that the pre-med student or the science went into. If you didn't, then you would have to do a graduate diploma in that area. Again, it's slightly different per faculty and per... originally, when the Melbourne model came out, it was cookie cutter that said, this is the way it's going to be. And now there are some cracks in the brickwork that understand it doesn't quite work that easily, so other areas have come in. But yes, it's definitely, there are pathways. And if you get on the train very early and understand those pathways early, then then you're not even set behind by doing one degree over another as your initial degree.
We might have one more question over here and then take it to
We'll
the
do two,
students.
because she's had her hand up here too. So.
Sorry, love.
Thank
I'll
you.
bring it over.
I'm sure this will be covered later, but I'm just wondering if there are specifically like big bands available here, or stage bands, or
Yes,
like.
there are two stage bands. One is more repertoire based, and one is more the student composition and improvisational based. So both kinds and types, in historical and looking forward groups.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Is that right? Did I cover that right? Yeah. Okay. And one more here. Mm-hmm. Very good question. The short answer is not really, but there are subjects that will be of interest and that will make sense towards the music degree. What am I thinking in the absolute? I mean, on the spot, I can't come. But if you look at the list of breadth subjects, it's quite remarkable. I mean, you can learn how to, I've said this before, but you can learn how to grow an ear out of your arm. That's a possibility, apparently. And that would be very useful for when you need bigger ears. I don't know. Anyway, no, there's at the VCA side of the faculty, they are not part of the Melbourne model, but all of the Bachelor of Music Conservatorium are within the Melbourne model. So if you're doing, what is one of the visual art or something, I don't think that you are.
We have vocalists who are taking poetry and other stuff in humanities to help them their songwriting and their lyricism.
So yeah, again, I mean, really, there's going to be things that are really quite fascinating. Yeah. I think you've told me I need to end now, but we can answer more questions in a smaller. So thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. And again, if you have more specific questions, but I'll give the microphone back now.
Thanks, Don. You can take a seat, have a little rest. You will be hearing from him again fairly shortly to talk about music performance more specifically. But please, I'd like to invite our students tonight to come to the floor. And Susan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and everyone with you, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome, everybody. My name's Susan DeWedger. And I'm very fortunate. I have the one and only job in this country that has the title of Associate Lecturer in Music Entrepreneurship. One job in this country is there's probably on two hands I could count the number of people who do the work that I do in the world. I'm very, very fortunate. So we're going to talk about that in a little while. That's what we've referred to as Ignite Lab. That's a special program that we offer. But I thought we really wanted to hear from some of the students. So what I'm going to do is introduce our students and their area of specialty. And I do have some questions, but I thought it would be really fantastic for our prospective students actually to ask the questions like, what's it like? How do you get into some of the orchestras? What's a typical day like? I thought perhaps you might like to have some questions. So if we start off at the end, we have Hannah Rundle, who's a trumpet student. She's a performance major. Michael Lowe, trombone student, also a performance major. Georgie Hanna, another trombone student, represent. You can tell Don's here tonight because he's got a great representation from the brass department. We have Eva Rain, who's from our jazz and improvisation specialty. James McKinnon, who's representing ethnomusicology in his third year. And then Rachel Lewindon, who's an interactive composition student in her honours year. So can you welcome our panel of students, please? And any of our prospective students, do you have any questions for our current students? No? Well, what if I get started and then something might pop up along the way? Perhaps if we can start with Hannah. Hannah, can you tell us about, you're in your honours year this year, so you're in your fourth year of study. Can you tell us about a highlight in your journey at the Conservatorium?
So probably the biggest highlight would have to be playing in the Conservatorium Symphony Orchestra. So we hold, the uni holds auditions every year. So basically if you come into the uni and your first year, you're going to go up against the people that are doing their masters and their honours years. So then gradually you kind of just like work your way up. And so for everyone, it's like a clean slate. So every year or sometimes twice a year, you get to do a new audition. And then that you kind of get ranked according to where you place and how well you do. And we've got a few different ensembles. So we've got the main symphony orchestra, then the Philharmonic Orchestra, Wind Symphony and concert band. So you kind of just get a placement every year. So that would probably have to be my highlight. So I worked my way up. I'm now in my fourth year and I'm playing principal with the Symphony Orchestra, which has been a fantastic experience. It's really hard work. They expect a lot of you. They expect a high standard. But like it's an invaluable experience. So this year I got to play Pictures at an Exhibition, which is like an amazing opportunity for me. Solo trumpet, which is pretty, scary. But like I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. So that would probably have to be the biggest highlight of my degree. Yeah.
And for our prospective students, if you're considering doing the Diploma of Music alongside another degree, you're eligible to audition and play principal parts and play in all of the large ensembles we have. So we have a number of students, string students who are diploma students doing a Bachelor of Biomed and a Diploma of Music, and they play in our symphony orchestra, and they have all the same opportunities to audition and participate in large ensembles as the Bachelor of Music students do. Thanks, Hannah. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about your journey through your time at the Conservatorium and how your path may have changed?
Sure. I started my studies here in 2015 as a Bachelor of Science and a Diploma of Music student. And pretty much halfway through my studies, I decided that I wanted to be a trombone player. So I transferred, and I decided to do the Bachelor of Music. And because of just how well the uni accommodates your subjects and your credits, it would take me 4 years to get my undergrad. So I graduate this year, which is really cool. And yeah, whilst you're a diploma student, you still get to play heaps, and you're not treated any differently than, I would say, a Bachelor of Music student. They look after you, and they do expect really good things from you. And then the Bachelor of Music itself, it's just a really well-rounded course. And because I did a science degree, after I finish Bachelor of Music, I'm actually eligible for Masters of Engineering. So.
Fantastic, thanks, Michael. Georgie, can you tell us about a highlight of your time here?
Yeah, for sure. I think the highlight stood out for me when I was in my first year last year. Like all my way through high school, like I'd been playing trombone for like 9-10 years, but I'd always kind of been the one trombone player. There was never anyone else kind of around my age group or anyone else that I knew socially that played trombone. And I still pursued it, and I loved it all through high school. But coming to uni, I just remember one of my first classes was what we call trombone class, and it was all the students from all the years and diploma students and everything come together once a week, and we have a class with just the trombone students. And I sat down, and all the students in the years above me stood up and they played a piece together. And I'd never heard more than, like 1 or 2 trombone players in my entire life. And suddenly I was hearing 20 plus, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I was like, I'm a pretty emotional person. And I got a bit teary, and I was like, that cannot be your reputation as a first year. I was like, you cannot start crying in your first class.
Especially about trombones.
I know. It wasn't that. Anyway, well, I held it together. And, until now, and everyone knows that I got a bit teary. But it was, it was overwhelming. I'd never been a part of something that big, especially in terms of brass and trombones in particular. And it kind of just reaffirmed all my decisions to be here and to be a music student and to finally be a part of people who had the same mindset and goal set that I did.
I think we could nearly end the evening there. That's beautiful. Thanks, Georgie. Eva, you're in your 3rd year of your jazz and improv. Second year, sorry. Can you tell us what the future is going to hold for you once you finish your time here?
Yeah. Well, I think the great thing about going through a uni course like this and going throughout the years is the connections you make and the people you get to meet through the course. The amount of really influential and inspiring teachers that we have in the jazz course is it's just great to be a part of that and to be able to meet them and to have them help you sort of start a career. I think most of us here are sort of looking at trying to become a professional musician. That's the goal. There are lots of hurdles you got to get through to kind of get there. But making all these connections is something that's definitely probably wouldn't have happened if I was just trying to become a musician without having gone through this course. So I think, that's the goal is to, be able to play music, forever. But it's always going to be a bit difficult. But so the connections that we get to make is really great. I think it also sets us up if we want to study abroad or overseas or anywhere else. Having a degree definitely will give you that step forward into going overseas maybe. I think it's just without the course it'd be a much more difficult process, and everyone's so supportive, and having the teachers that are so inspiring and have made a career out of their music really pushes you to
try and get there yourself.
Thanks. And we're going to talk a little bit further about this idea of preparing for really a new type of living a creative career, because the industry and the world in which as performing artists we operate significantly changed when the internet thing happened a few years ago. So we will talk a little bit about about the way in which we're going to help you to prepare to take on some of those challenges and be a relevant performing artist or a relevant person who expresses their creativity in whatever way you choose to do so. James, can you tell us a little bit about what the future is going to hold for you once you've finished your third year of your ethnomusicology studies this year?
Sure. So when I started my degree, I wasn't really sure where I wanted it to end up. But at the end of my second year, so the end of last year, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more, but I had an individual advising appointment with Susan. And from that, I kind of figured that I wanted to go into arts management or arts leadership, arts education management, kind of that sort of field. And now I work with Susan in Ignite Lab, helping engineer those kind of programs for people kind of in my position and for sort of everybody here today who wants a future in music but isn't sure where to take it. So what the future looks like for me is, so after this year I want to do my honours year, and I want to write my ethnomusicology thesis. And then after that I'm kind of looking at some master's programs and yeah, hoping to live a creative life from that.
Thanks, James. And Rachel, can you tell us a little bit about a highlight during your journey and perhaps briefly touch on where you're going to go with your training as an interactive composition?
Of course. I think the highlight has not been a specific event in my degree, because there were many. But I think it's probably been the experience of being around such a diverse group of people and diverse musicians, in that you have everything from Japanese techno through to composing and conducting for a small classical ensemble, to creating experimental theatre about frogs. So it's very, very diverse, and I think the people around you are what really shape you and the music that you enjoy and what the highlight of your... Yeah, but I think it's just the people. I think it's been the highlight of it. And at the moment where I see myself going next year, is I am involved with a lot of theatre work. So I will probably like to see myself moving into experimental theatre, but also I enjoy making my own music, classical mixed with electronic music, so probably releasing an EP in the next kind of year or so.
Awesome. I love that Rachel touched on this idea of community and networks, because that's a really great opportunity that doing a music degree offers you that other degrees don't. We have a lot of opportunity for small group interaction within quite a large faculty that's incredibly diverse, because we know that the choice of degree study you make is only one of many choices that are going to take you to whatever success looks like for you. But the strength of people that you are surrounded with is actually far more important, and the opportunity, like you're all nodding your heads, to work with a group of similarly very strong-willed, hard-working individuals who are there because they care very deeply about perfecting and working hard on their creative craft and supporting each other. It's a really wonderful, diverse and rich community, and I think that that's something that you may not see in other faculties, is this just the passion that comes out of our students for what they do and where it's going to help them to be relevant and change the lives of others through that craft. So we're very, very lucky, and we have within our teaching staff that same notion of that we apply our musicianship in lots of ways that allow us to create a sort of sustainable future, sustainable career for ourselves. So we're probably going to have to move on to talk briefly about Ignite Lab, but what I'd really highly recommend you do is our open day that's on the 19th of August, is that correct? There will be, the buildings and the premises will be absolutely chock-a-block with students to come and speak to, so I'd really highly recommend that you come along and see us on open day and have a chance to meet many more of our students, hear them perform, hear them talk about the role that music plays in their life today and where it's going to take them, and see how that might sort of positively influence your decision about what your course of study is going to be. So could you please thank our lovely student panel for this evening? James is just going to very briefly change hats now. And James and I are going to speak just a little bit about Ignite Lab, this program that we started last year at the Conservatorium.
So, you've already had our introductions, James, Susan. And as Susan said, her position as lecturer in entrepreneurship is one of very few in the world. And that puts everybody that studies at the University of Melbourne, especially at the Conservatorium, in a really privileged position of being able to have a degree that is very forward-looking and very career-focused. And that means that everything we do not only goes towards our art, but also towards ourselves and towards our career and towards our future. So the Ignite Lab program has three major arms that helps us as students find our future. The first one is through a series of workshops and seminars that we hold throughout the year and throughout the semester. We get guest lecturers and guest speakers in from a variety of different facets in the industry. And they come in and they talk to students about the ways that they've developed their own career and the different things that they've learnt along the way. For example, our first one this year was called Build Your Teaching Studio, and that was with pianist and educator Tim Topham, and he gave a really intricate and detailed rundown about the ins and outs and the business side of teaching, which we don't often get, but there's a lot of paperwork involved with teaching. The most recent workshop we had was called Musicians' Personal Finance, because, as everybody knows, musicians are just rolling in it. But that was really handy because managing your finances as a musician is really important, because often income comes in a lot of different streams. It comes sometimes sporadically, so managing that and making it sustainable is really important to a successful career. The second kind of arm of the Ignite Lab program is through what we call the creativity funding. And that is a platform for students to, we modeled it off real world grants and funding opportunities, and they had to submit for grants and submit for our funding for whatever they wanted. So we ended up funding 10 projects, and the funding was worth $17,500. And we're funding everything from, one of our projects is a new way to distort guitar. Another one of our projects is a program a school holidays program for kids, getting them involved in music.
A couple of podcasts.
There's a few podcasts. Yep. One of the cool podcasts is all those street performers that you've seen in Melbourne, and you always wonder what their backstory is.
You know the dude with the air hoo that's always outside Hamer Hall? What's his story? So we funded a podcast that's going to interview all those people, so you can find out how they got to be playing air hoo outside Hamer Hall every day of the week, right? Super interesting. So that's a student-curated, designed project, and we've funded that student to go and make that podcast happen.
Yeah, and so that's the second arm. And the third arm is through individual advising. And I think this is the most valuable from my experience, switching hats back to being a student. So as I kind of touched on before, I went and saw Susan at the end of my first year, and I guess my thing was I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. And that was something that my parents also said to me when I wanted to do a Bachelor of Music. They said, "What are you going to do with that?" So I went and saw Susan, and through 3 or 4 sessions, I sort of came to the idea that I wanted to work in music, work in education, work in leadership, work in management. And that invariably has landed me this job, which has given me so much insight and so much inspiration into where I want to take my career. And I know that we've had, how many individual advising sessions have you had this year so far?
So I've seen 150 students already this semester. Yep. So which is a huge amount in total. The first year of the program, we were quite quiet. We saw about 70. I saw 70 students. Last year we saw 210, and we're already at 150. And they're half an hour, very specialised. There's a questionnaire you fill out before we meet, and the starting jumping off point can be help. I have no flippant idea what I'm going to do and I'm freaking out about it, or it can be I've got a very clear idea, I want to be principal harpist of the Berlin Philharmonic, or I want to own my jazz, I want to play at Poussin Rouge in New York, or, so whether it's very detailed or very vague, that's what my job is, to help you try and navigate forwards? What realistic opportunities are available for you and how to go and get there?
So they're the three arms of Ignite Lab, and I think what's important is that it recognises that, especially as musicians, we have our own sort of artistic fingerprint, and we all have our own backstory, and we all have our kind of future direction. And the thing about Ignite Lab is that everybody that is in the Bachelor of Music is so inspired and so creative already. It's just about channeling that and creating a career for you that relates to that the most.
Yep, great. So just in wrap up, our parents who are here, can I have a hands up if you are concerned when your child said they wanted to go and study music? Yeah, because I have two high-performing secondary school student musicians. One plays tuba, one plays bassoon. I don't open up the Sun Herald and see pages and pages of jobs, well-paid, full-time for bassoon players, right? But honestly, as a parent and as somebody who has not been involved in music, I was involved in business for quite a long time, I don't believe there's ever been a better time to come and study music, because the opportunities for where you can go with the type of training that we offer are absolutely endless. It doesn't matter where, the way that we are trained to think and express ourselves creatively on the stage and off the stage is so phenomenal. And with the program that we offer that can help you look at what your values and passions are and how to map that into a future that has really good artistic, creative and financial sustainability, there's never been a better time to do that. And particularly with this program with Ignite Lab, because there's no other program in the world that looks like this program. And the other music schools that have these programs that don't offer the range that we do are schools like Juilliard or the Royal Academy of Music in London. There's nothing in this part of the world. So we understand that you're coming to train to be outstanding at your creative practice, whether that's composition or performance or research, but also that you've got to be able to map that going forward to create opportunity for yourselves that's going to be sustainable and rewarding, and that's what we're here to do. So I hope that for parents that I've put you a little bit at ease that coming and studying music is an absolutely brilliant choice that the young people in your lives will be committed to, that will help them to flourish as individuals and give them great satisfaction. And there's wonderful opportunity for them regardless of where they choose to go once they finish their time with us. So please would you thank James? And thanks for your time.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, James, very much. Oh, I'll take those back. We'll probably need them later. It's time to get back to the nitty-gritty details. So I'm going to invite Don to come back on stage and talk you through our first discipline, music performance, which I imagine a few of you will be here and interested in. So
great, thank you.
You can hang out here.
I'll stay up here. And
I'll get out of the way.
well, thank you. Cheers. Susan, it's great having you here. It's been a couple of years now, and we've just seen amazing things happen. So, congrats. It's great. So yes, music performances. This is the largest area of concentration, or at least of intake of students each year. Usually around 120 to 150 students come into this degree, and yes. So this is the essence of historically the essence of the music degree is the one-on-one individual lesson and working with a specific mentor, and then in a one-on-one setting, and then small groups beyond that. Nowhere else in the university, except in veterinary science for some reason, is there this one-on-one experience still so intact to the degree. Of course, the basic contextual music studies, music language, music history, a new suite of ear training subjects are coming online soon, and many of them will be elective subjects as well. So if you're in a voice student and it's very important for you to have this type of transcription, ear training, or whatnot, then you have the opportunity of doing that and whatnot. So it's very, very much a smorgasbord approach to training you to know the basics and the language of music. As it says here, you do tailor your degree. There are some students that after 2 years of individual lessons, they're actually more interested in purely writing or purely business side of music, and that is absolutely at your disposal if that's what you'd like to do. If you'd like to take part in every ensemble possible, you can be as busy as you want to be with ensembles. And then, as we mentioned before, there's the hundreds, probably 1,000 of breath students to complement and go in the direction that you'd like to go. Makes sense, right? All the normal areas are covered here. I don't see, there, classical voice at the end. Okay, it's all there. I'm not sure why it's orchestral percussion and classical voice. Classical voice is one of our largest areas, along with keyboard. Yeah, there's one of my students. I'm going to say goodbye to him in a couple weeks. He's heading off to do a master's at Manhattan School of Music next semester. And he's a terrific player in person, but he is absolutely representative of the undergraduate and honors and even graduate students. So the first year, as it says, focuses on music performance skills. Practical Music 1 and 2 are your individual one-on-one lessons, but they also, that subject is a umbrella subject, and if you're a vocalist, this also has to do with some vocal training classes or an ensemble. If you're an oboe player, this has to do with performance in the Wind Symphony, as well as opportunities to play solo every week or an etude every week in front of your peers and with your peers and learn stagecraft and whatnot. Additionally, the music language and music history, just so that you can be a part of the international conversation of music. You have to understand the language to an extent, and also through those subjects often you find the passionate areas of interest for yourself as far as either performing or composing music styles. And then heaps of music elective opportunities as listed here, and breadth. Second year, heavily perform. You can go in any direction from here. You really can go into musicology at this point, and or more writing intensive subjects or more creative subjects. So it's after the first year, which is pretty much the same for all the performance-minded majors, or at least in the PCME side of which is all the kind of representative most of the people up here. This would be the year that you start focusing. If you go in the performance stream, then that means you're going to do more solo and or ensemble and or chamber music settings to get more fine, detailed work on your musicianship. If you go in any of the other streams, likewise, you can at that point turn in a portfolio and become a member of the composition in the classical tradition, I suppose, although it's much broader than that. But in the second year, you turn in a portfolio and you can get into that stream as well. Ethnomusicology and musicology, which we're going to hear about in just a moment. And then the third year, you have to run around in tights and an outfit like this while playing a piano that's, that's not true. You don't have to do it, but you can, certainly. And this is where the capstone experience in your chosen major generally occurs. Oftentimes in my area, music performance area, students are working towards the recital at the end of the third year. And of course it's an important thing, but it's not, again, it's just a point in time. And we really try to get it into the students' brains that this is one performance. The next week you should be doing the same performance in the kindergarten around the corner, and the next week you should be doing it in a retirement center, and the next week you should be doing it at your secondary school. This is a point in time, and we're really pushing for that kind of experience rather than we want to assess you and see if you're worthwhile or not, because that's not what this degree is about any longer. Opportunities to study abroad, there's lots and lots of opportunities, certainly with the universities that we're affiliated with, but also if you find a program that you want to go overseas for a semester, the university will help support that. In many cases, you'll pay your tuition here, and you'll go to school there, and those are the fees that you pay. You're already paying them through HECS or whatnot. And then the sample course plan, just to give an example. The first year, as mentioned, music history, music language. I asked that these principles of business law and marketing be put in just so you parents would feel more at ease with all of this. But the reality is that is a superb place to be able to learn how to make movies on your iPhone, or get into coding or whatnot. So it looks fairly clear-cut and simple, but there is a heck of a lot going on underneath each of these ideas. And as you see, as you go along through the degree, it gets more and more based on what you want to do in the areas you want to do. Practical music stream is available to the diploma student, and practical music or performance streams are available to the bachelor music students. Another one of our, I don't know why we have a whole bunch of conductors coming out and being highly placed here, but for some reason there are several that because they're good, but are now leading many of our orchestras around Australia and even around the world. But he was just named the principal conductor a few years ago in Adelaide. Other graduates. Right. So here's the information that you might be interested in for secondary students. Must complete VCE or equivalent. Study score of at least 25 units, 3 and 4 of English, and that's the one that's listed there because that seems to be the one. Maybe 2 or 3 or 4% each year of our students come up against that. Okay, these are guides. The Year 7 AMEB, it's not essential that you go through the AMEB system. It's just a guide for helping kind of sort where you might stack up. That said, if your ATARs are high and you're not an elite performer yet, that's why you would be coming to the performance side of the school. And a few people spoke about this diploma in music. This is pretty interesting now. The diploma in music, you can take any subjects through the bachelor, through the MCM towards your diploma, and that is a new setup. It's quite a lot of students are taking advantage of that right now. Yes, if you opt not to do a diploma, if you still want to be involved in music, that's something that we're really pushing. You get the lifelong community out of music and ensembles. So if you opt not to do diploma, you opt not to do the Bachelor of Music, you are desired, and we want you to be involved in some way, and you can do that. If you're in engineering, you can do music as a breadth. So there's this quick snapshot, and I'll speak with more of you directly and answer specific questions after. Okay, any questions about the music performance initially? Too easy. All right, and now we're going to move on to Elliot Geiger.
Great, yeah. Good evening. I'm Elliot Geiger. I'm on the composition staff at the Melbourne Conservatorium of Music. One of the more confusing things, it has to be said, about the Conservatorium in its current configuration, but also I think one of the more exciting things, is that we have two completely different composition programs. And looking at this from the outside, you might be a bit puzzled, and I don't blame you. It does look a little confusing from the outside, but we on the inside are convinced that these two programs are actually very complementary to one another. They offer very different things for very different students. So my colleague Mark Pollard is going to talk to you a little later about the interactive composition program, which starts from first year. So it's distinct from the track that Don has mentioned here, which starts with the first year of performance. Interactive composition is a separate track. If I'm going to generalise really, really broadly, I could say that interactive composition and the composition program that I'm talking about come at the same kind of thing but from very different ends. Interactive composition, as the name suggests, really focuses on collaboration, on composition in collision with all sorts of other things, whether that be art gallery installations, whether it be video games, all sorts of ways that music composition sort of intersects with other art forms and other areas of activity. In the composition program, on the other hand, we concentrate on the skills for writing music no matter what ends you're going to put it to. So we're certainly not opposed to our graduates going out and using those skills in whatever area that they want to, but the training that we offer focuses on the notes, on the sounds, on writing for the instruments, and it comes out of an assumption that you're dealing, at least in the first instance, with music notated in the conventional way and mostly written for live performers to perform, although not exclusively so. So the composition program starts in the second year. You spend your first year as a performer, which means you actually have to audition as a performer. And you do practical music 1 and 2, and part of that common first year with the other, with the performance students and also those who may be considering going on to musicology or ethnomusicology. Why do we do it this way? Why do we not have an application for composition at the get-go? There are arguments both ways about this, but there's a couple of really important things. One is we're really convinced that the composers who write best for performers are the ones who actually have experience of doing that themselves at a high level. And so it's really important that we have composers who know what it feels like to be involved in performance at a tertiary level, playing in orchestras, playing in ensembles and so on. The second reason is actually a sort of a career-based, it's a practical one. Any composer who is seeking to make a career for themselves will do so only if they have that kind of network that Susan and the students were talking about in the panel discussion a little while ago. Other performers to work with, to collaborate with, to build their careers alongside. And if composers are conveniently put in the box that says composer from first year, they don't have that same level of involvement and engagement with those performing students who are actually going to be their future colleagues in a really crucial way. So you can then, after that first year, audition for the composition program. So you put in a folio at the end of the first year of pieces, and we will we then assess those on the basis of what we see in terms of your musical skills, but also the promise of something individual that you might be able to bring to your music as it develops. There is an elective that you can take, by the way, in first year called Composition Studies, which is sort of points you towards the direction of the composition major, although it's not compulsory to do that subject, but it is available as an option. The composition program is small. We take in around about half a dozen students each year at second year level. We think this is a really good number because it provides for a small, really tightly knit cohort of students who work together. We as the composition staff get to know every student and their needs and watch them develop over the course of their 2 years or longer in the composition program if they go on to honours and perhaps to postgrad as well. The composition program works through a series of projects for different ensembles, writing for specific ensembles with specific constraints. Those ensembles get larger as the course goes on, and in fact if you continue into honours, you get to write an orchestra piece which is read through by the university orchestra, for example. And that's just one instance of the constant principle that we believe in, that getting your work performed, learning how to interact with performers is a crucial part of learning your training as a composer and making a pathway for yourself into the future. I think there will be an opportunity to answer questions about the composition-specific area later on when we break out into our separate groups. So maybe I should leave it there. I know we're pressed for time, but thank you. And now we have Nick Tochka, who's going to talk to you about both musicology and ethnomusicology.
Thanks. Hi, folks. So I'm Nick Tochka. I'm the head of ethnomusicology here. I'm going to be speaking both for my area and for musicology, which is headed by Professor Kerry Murphy. So I doubt many of you are here because it's been a lifelong dream to be an ethnomusicologist, right? So people come to university because they love performing, or they really want to be a composer and they want to hone those kinds of skills. I just want to kind of give you a gloss on what it is our areas do. So musicologists tend to study the history of classical music in Western Europe. So they tend to be historians who use written documents and archives, things like letters, receipts, newspapers, in order to reconstruct the musical past. Ethnomusicologists, with the ethno on the front, tend to study popular or traditional music from outside of the West. So non-Western musicians from around the world and how they make music meaningful in their lives. We tend to look at contemporary music, and we tend to study it by talking to people, hanging out with them, learning to play with them, and trying to understand and get inside their heads. Now, this is sort of a really sort of quickie version of what each of these disciplines are. And in fact, our faculty here, our musicology and ethnomusicology staff, demonstrate the kinds of really exciting intersections between these areas and with performance and composition. So, for example, one of our faculty members has recently made a documentary about music on the Cocos Islands. Another faculty member has recently released a critical edition of Renaissance music. Another faculty member has written, a couple of released CDs of historically informed performance practice pieces. I write about popular music. I write academic books, monographs, and articles. I also publish pieces in popular magazines. So I just had a piece published last week about white identity politics and Stephen Foster's music. Stephen Foster was like a 19th century popular musician in the U.S. The Oh, Susanna, oh, bum, bum, da, 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 that guy. So you may actually be a musicologist or an ethnomusicologist inside, and you just don't realize it yet, right? And I know that sounds scary, and so I'll just give you a couple of sort of warning signs. So if you're the kind of person who, you know, is always talking your friends' ears off about sort of the background of a piece. What does this piece mean? Where does it come from? What's the biography of the musicians, right? That's an indication you might be open to musicology. If you're the kind of person who's sitting in orchestra, you know, you have a big rest during Beethoven, you turn to the, you know, the horn player next to you or whatever, and you say, hey, isn't this symphony just an expression of patriarchy, right? That's another indication that you might be open to musicology. You know, I got into ethnomusicology largely. I was a performer. I'm a double bassist, and I also play guitar in bands. And I was also an anthropology major as an undergraduate. So I took a lot of subjects in a lot of different areas and had a lot of different interests. So performance was my passion, but I really wanted to situate it and contextualize it in these conversations that were going on in other disciplines. And that's really what coursework here in musicology, ethnomusicology can do for you. In terms of musicology, so you can see that these green things are things that you got to take. And then you have all of these other options in yellow and in, I don't know, is this purple or blue? This one. So musicology majors tend to, after that first foundation year that we've just heard about, tend to then develop their program of study in tandem with different subjects that they're interested in. So these are not things you have to take. These are things that Professor Kerry Murphy kind of put up as a potential plan for someone who might be interested in this area. So you can see that there's a focus on electives that have to do with late 19th century, early 20th century music. There's a focus on learning a foreign language, a Western European language. Once you make it from year 2 into year 3, your capstone or your end of this track is taking an intensive course on writing and thinking in musicology. So you end up with a, although it's actually not on here, but there's an elective in semester 2 where you learn sort of the nuts and bolts of writing in the discipline, in doing archival research. This is the word ethnomusicology. Ethnomusicology is really in transition right now. I was appointed last year, and I'm revamping the track right now. All of these subjects that you see are ones that you would take if you came in next year and began as an ethnomusicologist. So we have a really clearly defined track that takes you from year 1 to year 3. You can see these things in yellow. We have Musics of the World, which is an introductory survey where you learn about musics from all around the globe. We have area studies in ethnomusicology. So if you were here, if you started next year, the year after you would take a subject that specializes on music in Asia. And then you might have another opportunity the year after to take a subject on music in Eastern Europe. So this changes from year to year. The topics course gives you an in-depth look at a major paradigm or issue in the discipline of ethnomusicology. Next year it's going to be music, media, and technology. So we won't look at how to use technology to make music, but rather we'll look at contemporary and historical perspectives about the way that media and technology shapes musical life for people in different cultural and historical contexts. The capstone of this particular track is called the ethnography of music, and this is a semester-long subject where you learn how to plan and implement a project in ethnomusicology. So in basic terms, you learn how to talk to people about music, how to interview people, how to elicit data in the forms of conversations. You also learn how to go through an ethics application and actually get approval from the university to work with human subjects. And you also talk about some of the ethical issues with representing and writing about human beings. You also see that, you know, these subjects here are just suggestions for the kinds of things that you might take as breadth subjects. These are all things that I wish I had taken when I was a student. And you'll see that within the university, we have these things called breadth tracks, which are sequences of subjects that are, you're not required, if you begin with the first subject in sequence, you're not required to take the other ones. But they put together these little packages of subjects for you. And so people in ethnomusicology tend to take more critically focused anthropology or sociology related kinds of subjects. You know, I'll just mention briefly, just because I know there is a lot of talk about, you know, what do you do with a degree like this? So you're not going to be an ethnomusicologist, probably, right? You're not going to get my job. You'll have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands, right? I have kids, and I need this for the health insurance. But people in ethnomusicology and musicology do tend to be the kinds of students who are really high-level performers and also want to contextualize that within sort of major ways of thinking and approaching and living in the world. So people do tend to go into things like law. People do tend to go into other kinds of, like James, for example, going into arts management. People do tend to maybe not necessarily be on that strict performance track where they're going to be, what did you say, Susan? The harpist in the Berlin Phil? Yeah. So you probably won't be the harpist in the Berlin Philharmonic with an ethno degree. But the name of the game with our tracks is really kind of flexibility. I'm going to be around at the end for more questions, and so I'm happy to talk more. But thanks, guys.
Nick didn't press the next slide, but now we'll be hearing from jazz and improvisation. Dr. Vinks, please do take the stage.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming out on a cold night. Jazz and improvisation has been here at the VCA for almost 40 years. It will be 40 years in 2020. And 3 years ago, we became part of the Conservatorium of Melbourne. And that's significant because we actually run a very different program. And I'll show you that in a minute. But as Elliot said, that there is some confusion on the website. So for our students, they're performance majors, but they're also composition majors, and they're also technological majors. We think that composition, you know, in real time, knowing your harmonic language, being able to, you know what notes are in a C altered scale and then improvise over that, and then know how to record that, know how to interact with other musicians, know how to arrange, is part of the contemporary experience of music. So what we do is we use jazz, particularly in first year, as our central sort of pedagogy. We learn the African-American tradition of jazz standards, how to improvise over them, and, you know, we go back to the blues, more contemporary jazz standards. Then in second and third year, we're asking our students to write their own music and lead their ensembles. So our small ensemble program is very important to us. So in first year, for example, we have 7 small ensembles. So we take in 7 drummers, 7 bass players, 7 piano players, you know, etc. So we have a small cohort of about 35 to about 42, which is probably enough for us. And after we work with our students in developing their improvisation skills over traditional harmonic language in first year, second and third year is about, we say, shaping their own voice. So what's important to us is that you bring to the world who you are, and you do that through the way you play, the way you compose, and this idea of community, which Don mentioned before and is really important to us. So there was a question before about rock music. And what I would say, you know, if you're a rock drummer, then yes, definitely come to us. But you won't leave as a rock drummer. There's a really unfortunate thing that happens to people who come in as rock drummers. They age. And it's really not that great to be a rock drummer after the age of 30. Once you lose your good looks, then you have to rely on all the skills that we teach you in terms of improvisation, arranging, not only the African-American tradition of jazz, but how the African-American tradition has now morphed through the world, and even in places like South Korea's got a really great thing going on. So we're asking our students to think about their place within Australia as music makers, but also globally. What are they going to contribute to the world? Not only using the African-American experience, but taking in Asian, taking in Indigenous, taking in technological ways of making music. A perfect day for, you know, our staff or our students is waking up, rehearsing, maybe doing a recording, then you go out and play a gig, and then you go out and eat great food with the band after the gig. And doing that in a part of the world where you don't know anyone, hanging out with the musicians, it's all about hanging out with the musicians for us. So that's why we learn these skills, and just eating great tapas in Spain, you know. So we talk about this, the jazz, world music, pop, folk, rock, but we're not really about teaching people to play genres. What we do is we teach the tools of contemporary music and ask you to put those tools together in a way that makes sense in the world in which you're living. So, we have big bands, we have experimental ensembles, but the core of our program is the small ensemble, where you'll be working initially in very traditional sort of jazz-based music, but then down the track you'll be writing your own stuff. I don't know what it is about trombone players tonight. That was totally accidental. Shannon is just a great example of someone who went through our program and is now working with the WDR Big Band in Cologne. One of the great ensembles, jazz ensembles. But we also have people working as avant-garde artists in Europe. We have people working as straight-ahead jazz musicians in New York. In fact, we had one of them come back last week, Nadia, who's got her own band. She's been really successful in New York. She's playing with also the Marie Schneider. I just cannot remember. Yeah, the Marie Schneider band. So she came back to talk to our students and showed, this is possible. So really understanding your tools. We've also got, I don't know if you watch that show Rock Whiz. Cleo, the piano player, is one of our ex-students. Often our students show up in the Triple J Top 100. Sometimes I listen to Triple J just to hear our students, if you're sort of thinking about a career in more popular music, don't limit yourself to just being a hip-hop drummer or a rock drummer. Embrace the hip-hop, embrace the rock, embrace the jazz as tools to a bigger life in contemporary music. And I'll just quickly go through. Because when we have our own independence, we're like Liechtenstein or something. We're very prescriptive about what we want our students to do. So individual performance studies, you'll have your one-on-one lesson. We also have a subject there called improvisation materials, which really opens a few doors to creativity, which are really scary and are very challenging. Ensemble studies, we've got small ensemble, large ensemble, and large ensemble you can pick, for a whole lot of stuff. Contextual studies, we use the word contextual rather than theory because people balk at the word theory, but that's where you really learn your harmonic language, and then you take that into your ensemble and you're playing it. So the theory is applied theory all the time. Then we've got the breadth area, and some students, I think I mentioned the example before, do things like, like English or writing poetry as a way of helping their lyricism. But what has amazed me is the number of our students who want to do things like calculus. They actually want to do that stuff, which surprises me. So we're part of the Melbourne model to that extent. We've got really going from undergraduate, honours, masters, and even PhDs. So you can be here for an awfully long time. But what a lot of our students do is after a third or fourth year, they'll go out into the world, do a lot of gigs and stuff, then come back and want to do the masters or do a PhD. One of our PhDs at the moment, was arranging and being musical director for Ricky Lee Jones when she was out here, but is now also writing for Australian Art Orchestra. Sort of two very seemingly polarised things, but because of these skills, this toolbox which our students have, they can go out and think, rather broadly. So in terms of getting in, it's pretty much the same as the other things in terms of the English language thing. And I'll really pick up on that point that Don made before. We do have quite a few students who've been knocked out, great players, in fact, some amazing players, but didn't get a 25 in English. And we cry when that happens, but it's a thing. So in terms of your audition, come to the open day. We'll talk more about that specifically, but start working on your jazz repertoire and improvising through standards. You might want to write one of your original tunes. And we'll talk more about that in the breakout session. So I'll hand to Mark now.
Good evening, everybody. A few people awake, I can see. That's good to see. Most are asleep. That's okay. I won't be too long. I think it's interesting that everyone has talked about how important it is to be interactive. Everyone's mentioned that tonight. And we are the Interactive Composition Program, which is pretty cool. I think one of the points that was made early on as well is that collaboration is the key to survival in the 21st century as a music and sound maker. Creative problem solving is critical to that. What is a musician in the 21st century? We can have a whole discussion about that. What is sound making? What is sound design? All of those things are in flux. We want our students to have jobs. Many of them do have jobs when they graduate. Many of them are teaching as soon as they graduate. We have strong connections with the commercial music industry. We make commercial music. We collaborate with industry regularly. Students come from classical backgrounds, from hardcore retro dubstep backgrounds, from EDM backgrounds, from sound design, and I suppose art installation backgrounds. Some of them come in as classical performers, work in our program, but also are allowed to play in the orchestra and are going on tour with the orchestra as well. So I can simply say it's about all of that. A first-year cohort will consist of, I suppose, very retro electronica students through to students that have very limited understanding of traditional music, but work only through a DAW, for those that know that. A DAW not like that, but a DAW that's more like that. But also the notion of what notation is in the 21st century, and as staff we debate whether notation is important at all for our students, whether they should be learning how to read or not, because that is an issue that we all have to deal with, because there are other things that are replacing that. I say all of these things because interactive composition as a program is a way of making. It's not a genre. It's genre inclusive. And it's open to whatever you do. It's not about what we do, it's about what you do. And the program is informed by whatever the cohort wants to make at that point in time, whatever their background is when they come in. There are a number of key things that are part of that course, and if I put my glasses on with a bit of luck, I'll get the next slide. Yes, we do have that. You can see it talks a bit about commercially driven. Commercially driven aspects are really important. It's not necessarily a commercial music course, but it's functional. We want you to make something from your work. There are hundreds of ways in which music is monetized. Yes, we can talk about money. It's integral to what you do. We want to get a job. We talk a lot about the way it works with other media. That is really critical to what goes on as well. It's a music and sound with other media programs. And by other media, that is basically anything that is not necessarily sound-based. So yes, film, work with film, television, animation, theatre, music theatre, dance, the advertising industry, the video gaming industry, through to a range of other areas such as working with museums, with galleries, and so on. Anywhere where sound is used is right for work within the interactive composition program. It's funny about performance. Probably all of our students do perform and are touring. Quite a few are signed, and there are 3 in first year at the moment that are on leave and working in Nashville, and also with the producers in LA. And I think this is, it's not necessarily an original intent of the program, but it's developed to become a strongly commercial, I suppose, incubator for making, in that those that are interested in working in particular ways will often come into the program and work together while they're here. Al was one of the first graduates. She's been out a couple of years. She's signed with Universal now. She works a lot with other media and also with fashion, as well as in the commercial music, broadly commercial music industry. I know I'm talking fast. I want to get through this so we can get into detail in other sessions. This is the program, and a little like the background that Rob had discussed, the interactive comp area is separate as well. It has its own dedicated program. You would look at interactive composition across the 3 years of the program as a core subject a track. You would complete 16 collaborative projects as part of that subject alone, and a free choice project of 4 free choice projects, and your first collaborative project begins in week 1 and is shown to everybody in week 3. So we begin quickly, and you make things all the time in that subject. In the middle subject, music making laboratory, you're exploring and performing every week, and you're working with someone from the John Zorn group, who's now living in Australia, in exploring ways of making and improvising in a semi-scored environment, moving through to conducting and writing for scores for session musicians in the studio, moving through to working on web series that is being released soon with 21 episodes in the third-year program, and making things at music theatre students that go to production, where the interactive comp students are also acting and performing and doing a range of things. This year we introduced a program called Sound Studies. We didn't think music was a great label for it. We called it Sound Studies, and music sits inside that. Music is just one thing that we look at. We look at sound design, we look at acoustics, we look at production in the, I suppose, the literal kind of commercial music sense, as well as production in the sense of working in theatre. We also look at aspects of critical listening in the studio, and so on. So I suppose the program has been adjusted to reflect the nature of listening in the 21st century. Rather than musicianship, it's more about understanding how things work in the studio and being critical of your own work and other work in a very constructive way. And I will jump on. We've talked a bit about the electives and breadth process. There are 4 electives for interactive comp and 4 breadth subjects. There's a little bit to look at within the audition requirements. The first thing that I should say, it is by audition only. Yes, the minimum ATAR of 25 is required. We don't look at the ATAR score, a little bit different in that sense. We're the kind of oddball out. We do look primarily at what you make, no matter what sort of background you come from. We've included score as a component again. A lot of those that are applying for the course aren't score-based, but we require them to submit something. Many come from an electronic dance music background and are very much used to working in that genre. We also require an audio-visual work that demonstrates your ability to work with other media in some form. You also get a creative task that you have to do on the spot. You won't get that until you arrive, and you'll have 5 minutes to think about and then make it and show it to us. No amount of bribery will give that out. There is a short performance that is a part of that as well. What else do we have here? We go on to that component, and I might then say thank you.
It's pretty mind-blowing. I mean, just this presentation for me this evening, and I work here and I'm here 24/7. There's so many things happening in so many directions. So if you want your mind blown, walk around the campus for a few days and try to understand what's happening. It's just remarkable. So I think that brings us to the end of this portion. Is that correct? So would you like to engage the microphone again?
It's not working,
Okay.
so I'll come up and join you, Don. That's the end of the kind of formal presentation for tonight.